Bring this, y'all. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for attending the 36th Annual Carolina Farm Stewardship Association Sustainable Agriculture Conference. You have joined today the session on advocating in coalition for just, sustainable, and resilient agriculture, presented by Nick Wood and some guests that Nick will introduce. Some esteemed, wonderful guests that Nick will introduce. My name is Jared Cates. I am the community mobilizer here at CFSA, and I will be the workshop host. So feel free to introduce yourself and put your questions throughout the workshop in the chat. Please remember our conference community agreements. Please keep them in mind when you engage in chat or participate in group discussions. And before we get started, we really would just like to thank Weaver Street Market for being the sponsor of this session. Please check them out under the sponsors page or visit them at the trade show for more information. And we really appreciate them making this session possible. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Nick Wood to get us going.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jared. Yes, my name is Nick Wood. I serve as the Advocacy Manager for the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association and also was the convener and co-founder of the North Carolina Food System Advocacy Coalition that you're going to hear a lot more about today, and even have an opportunity to participate in the coalition as we move forward in the small groups we're going to do. I'm going to do a little preamble, and then you're going to get to hear from a great panel, including Nick Tyre, Victoria Nwankadu, and Crystal Taylor, and we've got the incredible Chester Williams, and I'll let them introduce themselves later on in the panel. But this is a wonderful group and a really exciting coalition that I'm very excited to tell you about. So I'll jump right in. And so, as with many folks in this room, the COVID-19 pandemic revealed and made worse a lot of cracks that were already in the system. Particularly those of us in the food system world saw this work take even greater precedence, and the need even more so to forge these connections and work together, whether it's around a sustainable environment or access to healthy food, the ability of our agricultural producers to reach market, and the health and safety of our food system workers, that there were incredible issues. And so many of us, including farmers and food hubs and farmers markets and farm worker advocates and food councils and parent organizations and health advocates and many more, came together this past January to say, we've got to do something. And what became the North Carolina Food System Advocacy Coalition was born. We also have faith-based groups, food security organizations, environmental justice groups, and so many, many more. And we've come together, and I'll tell you in a bit about some of the things we've done, but we've come together around mission, vision, and unifying principles. And this mission statement, the North Carolina Food System Advocacy Coalition promotes just and resilient systems by developing and advocating for equitable policies that strengthen local agriculture and food systems in North Carolina. And our vision is where a North Carolina where everyone has collective responsibility and control from seed to table over their access to fresh, culturally relevant food that is produced in a way that is respectful to workers, animals, land, water, and air. I can't begin to say what an excellent group of folks that you're going to meet. Many of our leaders, there's so many that share this leadership and unite us together. And some of the things we've done, this has been a big year of federal advocacy, and that's mostly what we do together. And we have had countless meetings with Congress folks like Representative Alma Adams, Representative David Price. We've met with Senator Tillis. We've met with other congressional representatives, and we're going to be meeting with even more in the coming years around issues of climate and agriculture, around food security, around market access. And we've had double digits in everyone, and we're the ones that these offices are now looking to for guidance about what just agricultural policy is. We have regular meetings about every other week on Fridays at 1, and we educate each other. We share stories from what's happening on the ground. We create these collective missions and visions. We've learned about BIPOC farmer debt relief. We've learned about the Build Back Better Act. We learned yesterday about the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Act, and we've learned a whole lot about the Farm Bill, which is one exciting campaign I just want to share with you before turning it over to our esteemed panelists to really talk about these core issues and start a discussion, we hope, before we move in together. And so we had our first campaign and our first statewide meeting in October, as well as our first full month with a contract administrator and contract organizer. And we came together at a farm, and we created this Farm Storm campaign, and where we were educating people about the Farm Bill, which is a gigantic piece of legislation that impacts everything from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program to conservation programs, to programs that support farmers markets and other important crucial items in our nation's farm and food policy. And we reached nearly 200 people through 27 trainings. 7 of these are outside at farms and food hubs, including at ABC2, and you're going to hear from Chester up in Halifax County. We met in Goldsboro, in Burgaw down in Pender County in the southeast, Columbia, South Carolina, connecting across the Carolinas, Charlotte. We had 2 in Durham, and we had countless folks show up online, and we got an opportunity, just like folks here did yesterday, to have a listening session with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, which is an incredible group that CFSA, RAFA USA, and Self-Help Credit Union are a part of. And they're really a leading voice on Capitol Hill, and that platform shapes everything, and we have that opportunity to give voice and let them know what small and mid-scale farms and local food producers and other food businesses are doing here in the South. And so we're going to start this conversation here. I'm going to look at my our run of show here. It's one of my new favorite words to make sure I haven't missed anything. I don't think I have. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves. They're each going to have 4 or 5 minutes, or 3 or 4 minutes, something like that, to talk about one of the 4 issues that we work on. And also, as Jared says, please introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from. If there's something you're excited about this workshop, please feel free to share. Yeah, so we'll move on forward. And so we're going to hear from Nick Tyre of PDB Farm. We're going to hear Victoria, and I use the last name because there's 2 Nicks, so Nick T and Nick W. And we've got Victoria from Student Action with Farm Workers. We've got Crystal, one of the co-founders of the Black Farmers Market, and then Chester, who's actually going to be our first speaker from ABC2. So do you want to kick us off?
Yes, thank you, Nick. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be in this space. As you hear about the council and the great things that we've done to set the tone for this panelist conversation that we want to share with you. I am Chester Williams, the founder and CEO of A Better Chance, A Better Community, located in Halifax County, which is in northeastern North Carolina. ABC2 is a nonprofit that works with young people ages 10 to 24, taking their passions and make it real community action. Where we do talk about food and recreation amongst those things. ABC2 does act as a food hub in northeastern North Carolina, supporting local and small farmers and taking that to a regional scale in our area. And today I'm coming to talk with you about nutrition security versus food security, and how do we make an intersection in our food system, talking about nutrition and food security. So we know that food security is defined as the availability and the access of food to all people, whereas nutrition is about a situation that exists when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meet their dietary needs and food preference to be active and healthy. So when we talk about food security over time, we've been talking about growing food connected with farmers. But now when we look at the nutritional security perspective of it, it gives us a different viewpoint and looking at our local and regional food systems from a different perspective than just growing food, but being more inclusive, looking at historically marginalized populations, looking at climate change, looking at the diminishing of land and water resources or flood-prone areas in your area, and looking at environmental, looking at environmental justice issues that come up, and changes in income, looking at diets, and looking at smarter ways of producing food to be able to deal with food waste and promoting improved nutritional outcomes. So throughout the coalition, there have been several programs that Nick mentioned briefly earlier. One is the Farm Share program, which was a program that was throughout the state that was provided to be able to support local small farmers, particularly BIPOC farmers or Black and Brown farmers, to be able to have retail opportunity to be able to provide food for boxes that goes into community or people that may not have access to healthy local produce. And then the program just continued to grow and took a life on its own, where farmers were now not only growing food, but also providing recipes, providing ideas on how to prepare the produce that they was providing in the box, and were providing that connection to the communities where they know directly who their farmers are. Particularly for the Farm Share program at ABC2, working with our farmers actually helped them to spark and kick off the historic Halifax Farmers Market because we didn't have a farmers market that was taking place during that time. But because of the Farm Share program, it ignited that type of community response to be able to have a farmers market that was led by Black and Brown farmers to be able to create that access point throughout. Also, the Farm Share program led into advocacy opportunities where Nick mentioned before, we actually had House Representative Michael Ray to come to one of those farmers who participated in the Farm Share program to their farm with other farmers who participated to actually talk about and advocate funding for the Farm Share program, as well as the Farm Bill also. And it was a very engaging conversation so the representatives could see not only what they're growing, but also the daily activities and how they're connected with the community. And then also that led to the Farm Storm, when we talked about the Farm Bill, where we actually had an event at ABC2 at our community farm, where all the farmers, but it was a very diverse group of people that came that heard of the Farm Bill, but was not really in tune with the details of the Farm Bill because they thought it was very complex or high level information. But because of the Farm Storm, it really broke the information down, what was in the Farm Bill, what are some advocacy points to move forward to make sure that the Farm Bill is accessible, but also reflexive of the communities and advantages points for small and disadvantaged farmers. So that was a huge hit for us to be able to engage and advocate in that way. And another thing I want to talk about in terms of intersectionality of nutrition and food security, we was fortunate in our region to participate in the Healthy Food Asset Map project with our Upper Coastal Plain Council of Government, and members of the council was a part of that process, where we take an inner look of our regional food system to see where the gaps and opportunities are. But during that process, we really learned things about nutrition as in terms of looking at those key points and factors that connect farmers, not just as growers, but also as advocates, but also as a true source of into distribution, into our farm to table restaurants, but into our schools, et cetera. How do we build a just and fair food system to support that? How do we build strong communities where now we're talking across different organizations, different institutions about our food system and how we support them? We're talking about vibrant farms. How do we connect those resources that are in the Farm Bill to the farmers? And we're talking about healthy people because now we got to make sure we meet the dietary needs so farmers can grow food, particularly to the needs of the members of their community, and creating a system of how to prepare the food, how to grow the food, and how we properly dispose of the food to be able to continue the food system. And then looking at sustainable ecosystems, because now we're creating new systems within our food systems, and we're having that conversation on how to make them sustainable, and then looking at thriving local economies. So with that came some recommendations of how do we foster outlets for equitable food access, supporting community-based food system planning, strengthening urban agriculture, engaging farmers in the food system more, and support food chain value business development to be able to sustain and make our systems stronger. And then creatively finance the regional food system from the perspective. And these are all things that have come up in the council that we're talking about. So that's all that I want to share today, because I can talk for days about this topic, because it's really important to me that we are what we eat. So we have to make sure that we're advocating for the right things, right? Advocating to our legislators to make sure that they're supporting thriving food systems like we're trying to create. So I will pass it to Crystal. I think
let me jump in real quick, and then I'll pass it on. And I'm gonna do this between our speakers and just say that I wanted to appreciate this. And also, Chester mentioned Farm Share a couple of times, and it got mentioned several times yesterday at the Food Hub workshop. So just so folks know, Farm Share is a program that gets local food, locally grown by about 80 farmers, running through about 10 food hubs, and gets it to people in need at no cost to them, whether it's food pantries or faith-based organizations or other organizations just doing that work in the community, because these food hubs have those relationships and have those connections from seed to plate. And so this program was funded by Blue Cross Blue Shield, both the foundation and the corporate, and has spent to date about $1.4 million on local food. And Chester, what he referenced, talking about Representative Ray, is we had an incredible, and Nick participated in this as well, lobbying campaign for $2 million in public funding for this program. And we may find out next week if we got it or not. It was in the budget for the State House, and they're negotiating the final budget, and we shall see. But it was that advocacy that made a big difference. And so I think it's actually also a good segue, because local food markets, we got to get these producers paid for their work, and they got to have access to markets. So Crystal.
Hi, everybody. My name is Crystal Taylor. As Nick said, I am the co-founder of the Black Farmers Market here in Raleigh and Durham. I serve as the Director of Agriculture and Farmer Relations for the market. And that just means everything relating to agriculture sustainability for the farmers and for our attendees to be able to learn about healthy, accessible food, for the farmers to have sustainable opportunities outside of the market, and anything we can do to try to teach people in the community that we're serving about sustainability and healthy eating as well. One of the things that I'm a fifth generation farmer as well, new beginning fifth generation farmer, and learning the pathways to sustainability through farming has been a very unique process for me. And so wanting to hope that we can encourage younger people to take on the task and the charge of learning farming and entrepreneurship in agriculture to understand the benefit it would have on our long life sustainability. So one of the things the farmers market is really passionate about is making sure we create space for Black and brown farmers. And it goes all the way from people that create harvest herbs to collards to mushrooms. We are interested in making sure we create space that people can learn how to prepare the food properly. Just understanding that farming has been a long time job for people of color. It's the oldest running job that people of color have had in our lifetime. So it's really important that people understand the severity of supporting the Black farmers market, Black farmers and Black businesses and entrepreneurs, that they create space to help feed a lot of people right now that we're going to have to look to towards the future. If people can see, meat is, the prices of meat are going up, and there's not a lot of availability out here left. And so if Black farmers were given proper representation and shared space, then I don't think we would have all the problems that we're having right now. But yeah, I'm just here to make sure that is properly said and articulated, and people understand the benefit and the need to support Black and brown farmers. Happy to be here. Thank you for holding this.
Thank you. And I think it's been really powerful working with Crystal and the Black Farmers Market as we build this coalition and people build their farms and build their businesses, because people should be able to make a living from feeding all of us and putting in that work. And a lot of these programs that we're advocating for and challenging can either help that process or hinder that process. And a lot of times they hinder that process, especially for BIPOC farmers, but small farmers as a general matter. And that's one of our charges, is to push for that and to advocate for it. I'm going to turn it over next, I believe, to Victoria. And I think it's really important to say that farmers and farm workers having safe, healthy, sustainable working environments is as important as having safe, healthy, sustainable farming practices in a lot of ways. And so I'm really thrilled that this coalition is broad enough that we've brought these issues together. So I'm going to turn it over to Victoria.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Wankodo, and I'm based in Durham, North Carolina. I'm the grassroots organizer for the nonprofit Student Action with Farm Workers, which I personally think is a very cool organization. It started in the 70s, actually, out of Duke University. These two professors would take their students to migrant and farm worker camps to observe the conditions and testify about the conditions. And then that practice continued for several years throughout the 80s, and in 1992, we're actually incorporated as a nonprofit, and we have all these student programs that bring students into the farm worker justice movement. So I can talk about farm workers all day, but I'll definitely share a little bit now. But just so you get a little sense of Student Action with Farm Workers, or SAF, as we like to call it, our mission is to bring students and farm workers together to learn about each other's lives, share resources and skills, improve conditions for farm workers, and build diverse coalitions working for social change. And so SAF actually has a bigger definition or broader definition of farm workers than some of our partner organizations use, and then is used colloquially. So we think of field workers, of course. We also consider people who work in the meat packing industries, and also people who work in processing plants, as well as greenhouses and dairy farms. So that's something about us. We've got this really broad definition. Something also very important to note is that 85% of your fruits and vegetables are actually harvested by hand here in the United States. So we have a lot of farm workers, and North Carolina is one of the states with the top number of farm workers in the country. And unfortunately, farm workers have really gotten the bad end of the stick for many years. Of course, we've got this terrible history with farm work in the United States, starting with slavery. And then after slavery, you had people who were doing sharecropping for many years after that. And we know the conditions in sharecropping were awful, and tenant farming, the very exploitative labor contracts and violence used to keep people from unionizing. And then you had the Bracero visa program, which was very abusive in its own right, which brought Mexican workers here during World War II to harvest crops. And then after that, now we've got the H-2A visa program and other people who just don't participate in that, who just do farm work. But I would say one of the biggest problems with farm work as it currently stands is that farm workers are actually excluded from some of the biggest labor laws in the country that were made in the 1930s. And because of this, farm workers actually still do not qualify for a national minimum wage. They don't have guaranteed overtime pay, and child labor is allowed, as well as farm workers are also excluded from collective bargaining protections. And the reasoning for this was back in 1935 and 1938, when these two big bills were passed, the majority of farm workers were African American, as well as domestic workers who were also excluded from this. And it was a compromise with Southern lawmakers to get the National Labor Relations Act and Fair Labor Standards Act passed. So that's really sad. And that still stands to this day. We're still fighting for minimum wage for farm workers. We're still fighting for overtime pay. Some of the other issues you see in North Carolina and also around the country are pesticide exposure. Of course, people who are picking your fruits and vegetables are exposed to pesticides all the time, and that can cause a myriad of different health problems, especially for children workers. And in North Carolina, with your parents' permission, you can actually work in the fields as early as 10 years old. There's also the problem of heat stress. There's no federal heat stress standard. There's no heat stress standard in North Carolina. And anyone who was here this past summer, the heat was through the roof. So imagine working extremely long hours under that heat with no mandatory rest breaks, no mandatory water breaks, no mandatory shade. That's what farm workers have to go through. COVID was very bad for farm workers, both migrant farm workers and H2A farm workers, as well as poultry plant workers. The migrant housing standards in North Carolina are really bad, and farm workers often live in dilapidated and very cramped housing. So that allowed for COVID to spread very quickly. And it's not very hygienic. As you can see, there's not mandatory water breaks, and sinks are kind of hard to come in contact with sometimes. And then also for poultry plant workers who work really close together, processing this poultry in the big factories like case farms, they're just so close together that it's very easy to get COVID, and there wasn't a lot of information about protecting yourself with masks and vaccines and stuff like that. The environment was just very ripe for outbreaks, which is exactly what happened. But fortunately, farm workers, of course, have always been resisting these awful conditions since enslavement. Farm workers have been resisting through slave riots, and you've got icons like Cesar Chavez, Ros Huerta, Fannie Lou Hamer, and people, farm worker advocates all across the country and in North Carolina, which is the good news. So like I said, I work for Student Action with Farm Workers, and in addition to us playing a role in the North Carolina Food System Advocacy Coalition, we also participate in the Farm Worker Advocacy Network, which is a network of organizations all across North Carolina that are interested in farm worker issues and farm worker advocacy. So we're very lucky and very proud to participate in that. We actually had a foundational role in that coalition, and we've been able to really get together to work on different policy campaigns and support each other, especially through COVID. So just reminding people that, you know, whenever you go to the store and you pick a tomato or you pick an orange, someone picked that. And it probably was not in the best of conditions. So just keep that in mind whenever you go grocery shopping, and think about how all of these different pieces work together, like Nick said. And I'm very happy to be here. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you. And we're about to hear from another Nick, but I want to thank you, Victoria, and just really appreciate everybody to see how all of these issues that may seem disparate really get brought together in a good way for us. And so that's been one of the great things about the coalition. So I want to thank everyone for speaking so far, and I want to turn it to our cleanup hitter to talk a little bit about the importance of sustainable agriculture. And I think, as many of us are aware, sustainable agriculture is the key to a lot of not only reducing climate damages, but also repairing the world and helping with climate mitigation. And just like with everything, there's important policies that get passed that impact this greatly. And so I'm going to turn it over to Nick T.
Hey everyone, well said, Nick. There's a lot that farming can do, and I'm excited to be here to talk about it. I'll be here to give the perspective of the farmer and the production side of things. So I work on a small family farm in Rockingham County, North Carolina, just north of Greensboro. We raise cattle, pigs, organic vegetables, all around ecologically centered practices. So protecting and building our soil is our top priority through the use of cover crops, diverse production, intensive rotational grazing. We enhance our soils for the sake of the environment and for better tasting food. It just happens to work out that way. We sell all of this food locally to farmers markets and online. So like many of the other voices in agriculture today, we see a lot of ecological farming practices used as an active measure against climate change or mitigating the effects of climate change. Soil health practices like we engage with here help maintain strong grass and woodlands that sequester carbon, they filter the air. The pollution isn't as centered like you'd see in a confined animal feeding operation. The environmental impacts of proper ecologically raised meat and food is even larger when you compare them to these confined animal feeding operations. I'm going to call them CAFOs from here on. But the greenhouse gas emissions that they emit, such as CO2, nitrous oxide is a big one that doesn't get talked about enough. When you compare them to the effects of these, the the positive impacts of even a small scale operation like this are really vast. Rotationally grazed livestock that produces healthy animals and a healthy environment are found at small farms across North Carolina and South Carolina, but we need the institutional support to rival CAFO operations that dominate most of the livestock production across the Carolinas if we want to restore the pollution, restore the destruction and pollution of our natural resources. Institutional support can look like a lot of different things. But one of the first things I'd like to talk about is reforming and expanding existing federal research and conservation programs. Programs like SARE, the Sustainable Agriculture Research Education Program, the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP. If there's any farmers on the call, which it looks like there are, you guys might be familiar with some EQIP funding to pay for cover cropping or to help implement a high tunnel to lengthen your growing season. And these programs do reach funding to farmers, but this year alone, more than 100,000 farmers were turned away from these programs and unable to access the funding. They're in great need. So I want to see more of that support through these programs. We should also see that these programs serve small, mid-sized, diversified operations, as well as BIPOC beginning farmers and ranchers to the full extent. They often go to large monocrop, row crop farmers where these are easy to implement, but we should be looking at the full scale of what a farmer looks like and really open our perspective to how we define a farmer. We also need to support the transition to livestock production systems that are based on advanced grazing management, which supports whole farm approaches to climate stewardship, including transition to organic agriculture, agroforestry, crop and livestock integrated systems, and so on. So it looks like we're cutting close to time here. So I just want to say quickly that with the strength of our coalition and diversity in numbers, I hope to see more conservation funding and the promotion of ecological ag practices through our advocacy work. So special shout out to any other farmers that are listening. Hope you join us. Your perspectives are really needed in this work. And I'll hand it back to Nick.
Excellent. And there will be another opportunity to comment on all of that. So we're going to spend the next 10 minutes or so, and I've got a question I'm going to ask all of our panelists, and then we're going to hear from Chester to talk about the small group activity. And it looks like with the numbers we have, we're going to be able to have one of us for each two of you to answer some important questions that Chester is going to tell you about. But before that, also, I have to say I am also in Durham, and I see some Orange County as well. So Kendall's suggestion of a meetup in the area, I think, would probably be well taken with this group, because after all, this is about building community and about building relationships, both through this conference with our handy app so we can be in touch with each other. And also, once I stop blabbing, maybe I can get a sign-in sheet in here for folks who want to get on the coalition list, because that's another thing that we do, is we have a listserv with about 150 people on it and rapidly growing, where people are able to share actions that we can take to support each other. And yeah, so I'm gonna go in whatever order people feel called, but why is it important that we work in coalition on all of these issues? And how has this coalition helped you in your work? Who wants to go first?
I'll go, if that's okay. I know for me personally, meeting Nick and some other people in the coalition, it has been. Okay, I'll get it for you. Can you ask Grandma? Okay, sorry, that's my toddler. So, but Chester's like, yeah. Being able to have access to information that otherwise I had no idea about has been incredible for me, to be able to be a voice and relate this information back to our farmers. Going into creating the farmers market, we were just trying to have a space for farmers to sell produce, but learning all the resources, the advocacy groups, the coalitions, the opportunities that being a part of this has brought to me, to be able to then share with them, to educate them on, has been incredible. So it's important that people that have information that can be advocates, that can share privilege, come together in this kind of space to be able to help encourage, the knowledge share and the information build. So that way we can be advocates and continuously really have the fight going, the revolutionary fight going, to make sure it's equal, fair opportunities for people of color and Black and brown farmers. I know, I didn't know anything about the Farm Bill prior to being a vendor for the farmers market. My grandparents were farmers, and I know they probably didn't know nothing about half the stuff that I know today, which has encouraged me to be a farmer. And so, if when I'm in conversations with peers in my age and family members about farming and why is this important and why should we do this and all these different things, they have no idea about the amount of loans, grants, and opportunities that they can access because they're not in these conversations. And the level of, and they're actually very intimidated by the language barriers that make them feel like it's not for them. They can't apply. They need to have all these degrees and, business LLCs or whatever the case is. And so, by being in conversations and groups like this, it is a complete, it's just a huge support net to be able to understand, to learn, to see people that look like me that are doing the same type of incredible work. They're not stressed out, they're not going crazy. It's just what we're doing, how we're handling it, and we're getting it done. And then also being able to have advocacy with someone like Nick, to have the conversation. Well, I don't know what this means. What does this mean? How do I qualify for this? Can we be a part of this? Can we get involved in this? Can we get resources? Like, what do we need to do? And I am okay. And being able to say, I don't understand, explain it to me, so that way I can go back and relay it to farmers what they understand in their own language, has been a complete, blessing, opportunity, so it's just been a great opportunity. I'm just happy to be a part of this, and hopefully we can encourage more people to tap into what's going on and what's being learned.
I think so. And we'll, once we come back from small groups, I'll have a Google sign-in sheet for those of you who want to get involved in the coalition for that. And I think being able to learn from each other and share with each other about all these issues, because as you've heard, all these different big things that you just heard about from our panelists, they bring that knowledge to our group, and lots of other people bring that knowledge too. We all like each other, which is really important. So who wants to go next? Why is it important we work in coalition, and how does this benefit what we're doing?
I can hop in real quick. I think going off of what Crystal was saying, aside from the long-term goals and the advocacy, we'd like to see the conversation that we have is so rich because of the diversity of stakeholders that come to the table. I mean, if it's not farmers, it's farm workers, organizations, it's farm market access groups, it's nutrition, it's everybody in the food system having a conversation about where do we need to put our attention, where do we need to put our support. And in that, my knowledge of how I perceive the food system as a farmer has grown, and I'd like to think that everyone else has grown as well. And that strength and diversity, there's really nothing like it.
Yeah, and I'll just say Nick has been just so excellent. I think you heard about CFSA from a food council person and reached out to me, and it was right as we were getting, it was maybe January or February, it was right as we were getting the coalition started. And it was like, well, you want to do food system stuff? Come on in. And here he is as a leader in our coalition. And actually, Brett, who's our contract administrator, was very similar. And Katie, who my colleague who may be on the call anywhere, connected me with Brett. And it was just like, hey, come on in. Let's get involved. And it's been really wonderful to do that community building. So yeah, who wants to go next? Chester, Victoria?
Cool beans, I could chime in here. So the reason why it's important that we do work together in this coalition is because, as my grandmother always say, get in where you fit in. But in this space, it does create an opportunity to bring different perspectives as it relates to the food system. I know for ABC2, we work with the farmers on the ground and we did a lot of work, but we did not understand truly what our purpose and mission was. So being part of the coalition allow us to see how the work that we were already doing can connect to policy and understanding what policy is, because that was a very intimidating topic for us to be able to talk to our legislators or be able to sign on to letters with larger voices, but also realize that there are others that are dealing with some of the gaps and opportunities and challenges that we were in our silos. So coming together helped to look at how do we access these resources, bring it to the table. Talking about the Farm Bill really opened up a whole new avenue to individuals to understand that, yes, it's a bit complex process and document, but when you break it down and really look at it, there are avenues of advocacy to make segue, to make changes that shows progress and how we can sustain this work for us. So for me, that's the importance of working together. It makes the work easier, and there is power behind numbers, and then activated individual power to be a part of the process in the way they feel more comfortable and grow and learn from that space.
Thank you, Chester. And I think just a few things to note out of what Chester just shared with us, and also Crystal and Nick, is we are organizing organizations. We aren't just organizing people. We are people, and organizations are made up of people. But all of these organizations have resources, not even just talking about money resources, but have the people resources and the big brains that talk about these issues and come to the table trying to raise conversations. And this matters a lot, because when we're meeting with Congresswoman Adams's office and we're talking about climate and agriculture, and Jan Jones from Second Harvest Food Bank is in the room and said the food banks support sustainable agriculture, and we're able to do the same. With that, people say, wow, they're all together. And when we're talking about something as large as the federal government, they're looking at numbers, and we have the ability to turn out dozens of phone calls. And I think we're only going to grow and do more when there's an important issue, and those get counted. And so that's why they are looking to us, because they know that we've got such a great broad base of knowledge collectively, and we show up 12 or 15 at a time. That we're someone that you need to talk to, and we do have power. The other thing I want to say is one of, I think, our goals in life, and you've heard a little bit of this explained, is to make policy accessible and demonstrate the power of advocacy and the efficacy of it and everyone's ability to participate. Because at the end of the day, much of agricultural policy is about programs and funding. Are the programs adequately funded? Do those programs work for small and mid-scale farmers? Do they work for BIPOC farmers? And in many cases, as we know, they do not. And by coming together and identifying those issues, we're able to change things. And we're also able to understand, as Chester said, we did a workshop on the Farm Bill. It was a half hour. Most of us were pretty intimidated before that. And afterwards, we said, hey, we can see our place in this. We can see our role in this. So I want to turn it over to Victoria to kind of close us out, and then we're going to give our panelists at the end of the program today another minute or two to kind of leave some parting thoughts with you. So Victoria?
Yeah, I like everyone else's answers. I echo what everyone else said. I'm thinking of this one moment. I was on a Farm Worker Advocacy Network call. It was like 2 months ago, maybe. And because of a bunch of like environmental stuff that happened this summer, lots of farm workers couldn't work, like the crops were failing, either it rained too much or rained too little, or what have you. And so because lots of farm workers couldn't work, they weren't making any money, and then they had no food, which is a very dire situation, given that humans need food, obviously. So someone from NC Field asked on the call, does anyone know of anyone who can give food donations to our workers who are out in Eastern North Carolina? And I put a call for that over our listserv, and I got like 10 emails asking to connect to Amy. And she was really, really grateful for that. And apparently some of the connections worked out, and we were able to get food to some of those workers. So just having connections like that, I think, is really important. And learning, I think Crystal touched on this, just learning so much from other people. Like For example, obviously the history of Black farm loss and land loss is so intertwined with farm worker history, and working with people who are working with BIPOC farmers. I feel like knowing that information and knowing what's going on with that really strengthens my ability to talk about the farm worker justice movement. And then people like Nick who are working on sustainable agriculture, I don't know what seems more daunting, like the climate change happening or getting the government to care about workers, specifically in North Carolina. So it's really nice that you've got people working, on heat stress standards on a federal and state level, and then you've got people like Nick working on sustainable agriculture in the meantime. So I think that's just a really awesome connection. I echo what everyone else has said.
Well, thank you. And thanks to all of our panelists. And like I said, at the end, we're going to give them another opportunity to have the floor and impart even some more wisdom. But now we're going to get to the part where y'all get to participate some. And we've got some discussion questions and some small groups. And it's going to be really small groups. So you're going to have to participate. I'm going to let Chester introduce this section, and then you're going to have one of our fine panelists facilitating you. And then we'll have an opportunity to report back, and everyone's going to have to volunteer. Chester.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. So like Nick said, we're going to break it to small groups, and you have each one of the esteemed panelists to help facilitate your group. Once you're in your group, and want to do this because this is probably the most important part of this entire time, because you are experts in the room and want to hear from you and capture some wonderful information. So when you're in your groups, we want you to start off with introductions so you get a chance to know each other. And then you're going to answer 3 important questions. One is, what issues are important to you? How have you engaged in policy related work? And then the final question is, what are some activities we can do together, have done before, to advance our goals? So looking at educational events, lawmaker meetings, etc. So while you're in your group, we also want you to select a note taker. We will share with you a Google Doc that if you want to type the information in, and then also someone to report back when we come back to the larger group to share some of the amazing conversations and discussions that you had in the small groups. So are there any questions? Thank you, Jared, for putting the document in the chat. Any questions? So we should be in our breakout groups for about 20 minutes or so, but there will be an indication when there is time to wrap up. I think the last 5 or 1 minute left, so you can wrap up the conversation and also get your notes ready to report back to the larger group. Sounds good?
Sounds great. All right, Jared, do your magic.
Rooms are open, y'all. See y'all in 20 minutes.
Looks like we're all back.
Yeah.
And this is quite impressive. We've appears we've come out with as many people as we went in with and as were before. So we must be doing something right. So I think Victoria and Nick are going to handle the facilitation for this part.
Yes, I can facilitate the first 2 group sharing, Nick, if you want to do the last 2. Cool, because I was in group 1. Sarana from our group is actually going to report back, and I will let her go. We had a great discussion in my group.
Yes, our group had Victoria, Grace, and Mr. Khan, and myself, right? And the notes are in the Google Doc, and I think Victoria just put the link there. So we talked about the growing of heirloom tomatoes and how it started a new farmer near Asheville started growing tomatoes and had like 251 year and then 2,500 tomatoes the following year, which is exciting. He also said they were extremely tasty, and once you had them, you wanted more. And he had relationships with some restaurants to purchase his tomatoes. But unfortunately, this past year has been really mean to tomatoes due to heat, flooding, fungus, and awful things all at once for his tomatoes. Another issue that was important was the humane treatment of animals, and the concept that where animals are treated badly, people are treated badly. Talked a little bit about the contract workers, farm workers, the farmers that are under contract with Purdue and Tyson and other big bird companies. Also talking about improving the welfare of farm workers. Grace has a family farm and has honeybees, goats, and other animals. And she's really interested in food and farming as tools of sustainable economic development. So the whole idea of agritourism, community development. She's a student at NC State. And, oh, I thought she joined us. Okay. How we've engaged in policy work. Am I like echoing?
No, you're good.
Yeah. Okay. So Grace has not engaged a lot, but she does call a representative when she gets emails. And I think maybe if people mute, because I think I'm repeating in somebody else's feed. Okay. All right. So I would talk about how hard it is as a student to have time to be a policy person. Definitely I'm thankful for CFSA because they provide via their listservs action steps that I could take to keep me informed and to call my representatives. Mr. Khan says that the conference is the first time he's been involved in policy, appreciative of it. But the bigger thing that was mentioned is that not only is there the desire to be involved in influencing policy, but policy influences us. So being the recipient of it, there was an example cited where money was provided to farmers of color, but the money wouldn't be for the current year, it would be for the following year, which makes it really hard as a farmer when you need the money now to do the farming for that year. So there was an interest in getting a little bit more involved in influencing the policy that's going to influence us. And then basically we were just talking a little bit about what we're hoping for the advocacy group. One, really appreciate that you guys are having, CFSA is offering people to take a course to how to become advocates. And then I like that you help keep us informed on what's happening on the farm bill, but also the COVID relief bills, the American Rescue Plan regarding Black farmers, providing benefits. And that's it. That's all I got. Any questions or any additions, Mr. Khan? And I think Grace had to drop out because she had internet stability issues.
Thank you so much. I don't see any notes for group 2, but was there a group 2? If so, you are more than welcome to share your answers to these questions.
There was no group 2. So
Okay. Cool. Nick, you want me to pass it to you then?
Yeah, let's do it. Group 2/3 was a great conversation. It was me, Mike Hansen, and Janice Stallings. And the issues that they brought up that are most important to them, which I was super excited to hear. One is land reform, protecting farmland from development, protecting it for farmers and for the environment, maintaining the proper transition of land to the next generation of farmers to steward and protect and to maintain the health of our natural resources. So that was great to hear. Another is being conscious that we live on stolen land and getting to know our native plants, our native food crops, and even more so being conscious of the equitable distribution of that land. And lastly, what we talked about was hunger and nutrition access to families, both in rural and urban areas, with a special focus on nutrition and nutritional language. When we get into the policy work that our group has engaged with, luckily both of them were newbies to this, and they were excited to join and ready to join. And I can't think of a better place to start than this coalition. I mean, if you want to just learn from other people's voices and figure out where this work fits for you, what interests you, what you're good at, and where your voice is the strongest. So we had a great intro conversation. I hope to see both of them in next week's coalition meeting. It looks like Chester was a part of the next group. So whoever will be talking for group 4 or 3, feel free to pick it up after me.
Hey, this is Jason. I guess I volunteered to do group 3, 4. So our group was me, Chester, Jeff, and Mr. Roberts. So as far as the issues important to you question, we came up with more environmentally friendly farming, getting food out to people in need, getting more diversity at markets with vendors and BIPOC farmer vendors, connecting farmers to retail access points and markets, small farmers to collectively work together to access places like Whole Foods, farm workers access to fair wages, and ways to find new markets. For the question of have we engaged in policy related work, would like to learn more about policy related issues, ways to connect current work to policy, staying in the loop, and share ways individuals can support and plug in and advocate for farmers' needs. And in the final question of activities and educational type stuff, we had getting people together to discuss a list of concerns and brainstorm solutions, farm storm events, and more advocate opportunities for farmers and growers to participate in. Any questions for us? Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks, y'all. I think if there's no questions, which we do have a few minutes for, maybe I'll just pause for a minute, see if anyone has any questions. All right, hearing none, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll pass it to Crystal, who will close us out.
Well, I think maybe if we mean close us out, we've got about 10 minutes left. So I'm sure we can figure out some things to do. So I'm wondering, I want to see if encourage the audience to either ask a question or if you have a comment, please do so, either speaking up or here on the Zoom or writing in the chat. And if we don't have any questions, I'm going to give each of our panelists a couple minutes just to say anything that's on their mind and anything that they think would be helpful. So yeah, so who wants to start?
Nick, this is Jared. I might just add a quick comment here. In my role at CFSA, I work on the policy team with Nick, but I also work with community food strategies and the network of food councils around North Carolina. And there's about 36 food councils in North Carolina right now. And the coalition and everything that you all have described as, familiarity and, nervousness about advocacy and, needing people around you to support you. I mean, that's why a lot of folks around North Carolina are forming food councils and participating in them, because they're wanting to get that network around them who's thinking about food in a critical way and starting to take advocacy on it. And so it's just been great to see at the state level, this being a space for food council members and have an opportunity to meet with other folks, and folks who are engaging in federal advocacy and really able to hone their skills. And I know Nick came through a food council maybe, and there's been several or a bunch of food council members participating. And so it's just, it's such a great opportunity. And I just want to thank members of the organizing committee and you all for talking about it today, because it really is it's just creating this cooperative space where we can all do stuff together and feel supported together, and really go to congressional meetings on a short notice with 15 people is pretty incredible. I mean, that is, I've been doing policy work for 10 years at CFSA, and that is not something that's ever been able to be done before. You'd have to organize a congressional meeting, a month and a half in advance, talk about getting farmers there. I mean, that's always really hard. So I just want to thank you all for being part of it and the work you all are doing, and for continuing to build this space in the way that it's being built, and kind of in this commitment to equity and this commitment to openness and inclusivity is just fantastic. So thank you all for being here today. That's all.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. It's incredible with this listserv, which you'll be able to get on if you sign up, is, we have an issue, say climate and ag in the infrastructure bill, or we're looking at fresh produce procurement reform now and other climate related things. I put out an email after setting up a meeting with the congressional office and say, call for participants in this meeting. And within 2 hours, 10 people have written me back, and we've got a good 15 for our prep meeting. And then we go in and we share leadership in terms of who is speaking. And it is very powerful. And at a crucial time back in September, we were able to pull off, I believe, three meetings within a week, and they were all really, really incredible. So I want to turn it over to our panelists, Crystal, Victoria, Nick, or Chester, just to add any thoughts you may have as we wind down.
Yes. So one of the things I wanted to say is that a lot of times people don't necessarily understand why our advocacy for Black and Brown farmers is important. And I just wanted to say that because there has been a lot of intentional systematic things that have happened to stop them from having access to be able to provide fresh fruits and vegetables, not just for themselves or for the community as well. And so as we look at, reasons why CFSA is important and other advocacy groups for food is necessary, is because there is a larger need than just for us to have food in our refrigerators. A lot of times we don't see things that are affecting us because we're just driving past projects or communities or just individuals that don't necessarily affect us. But we need to understand that having food is not a privilege, it's a right. And being able to access that is also a right and not a privilege. And so as we go about our day, we need to understand that there are people extremely less fortunate than us that can't just get collard greens or regular food to just be able to survive and sustain themselves and their families. It is inhumane of us to be able to have access and privilege to not utilize that to help people survive just based off of food. So, the charge needs to also be us helping other people survive in the human race in general, regardless of color or any of those things. We need to make sure we support individuals who can grow it, know what the hell they're doing growing it, and making sure we get it to people that can eat it. Like, regardless of, what bracket you fall under tax-wise, we need to make sure we feed people, and just period. So people can say, we need to make sure children have access to fresh fruit and vegetables. So it needs to be a priority. And we need to make sure we advocate and share our privileges, white, Black, or whatever, to make sure those people, all people, are fed. That was probably my closing remarks.
Yeah, you can do an abridged version of that. I was just gonna say this was it right here. So let's give Nick and Chester and Victoria, who wants to go next to give your final thoughts.
I'll quickly add, centering it about food. Like at the end of the day, it's about food. Like that's what brings me to the farm every day. That's what brings me to the coalition every week. I mean, when you really look at it through that lens, it's such a personal lens. It's every single day, 3 times a day, at least. Hopefully you have the privilege to. I mean, I can't think of anything more personal or engaging than food. So keeping that in the back of our minds as we get into the weeds of whatever policy, whatever conservation program, whatever farmers market, keeping that in the back of my mind is what keeps me going. And I'm happy to hear that's what keeps Crystal going. And I imagine it's the same for everyone here.
Wonderful. Victoria or Chester?
I can go.
So I'll be very,
Oh, go ahead, Chester. All right, I'll go. Yeah, I think just the discussion about workers and also about Mr. Khan's heirloom tomatoes in my group. Like, I think about farm workers on a regular basis working for staff, but thinking about like these weather conditions that happen that I complain about that don't affect my life in any other way other than me complaining really, really mess up other people's lives. And they're providing this very essential resource, like Nick was saying, food. So I think it was very humbling to be reminded of that, because I think of it from a farm worker standpoint, but I don't often think of it from a farmer standpoint. And there's other people who these things impact. So next time it is storming in the summer, I'll think about food, not just me. Those are my closing remarks.
Thank you, Victoria. All right, Chester, and then we're going to turn it back over to Crystal. I don't know if she can top what she already did. Chester?
so I'm gonna keep it very brief. Thank you all for being in this space today. Let's have this conversation. Let's continue the conversation. I want to see you all. Meet me at the next coalition meeting, and let's continue to have these conversations, talk about other avenues of advocacy. But I do want to see you at 6:30 at the cocktail and conversation about policy. Because what I heard today from every group, that we are interested in learning more about policy. And what best way to start is here at the conference at 6:30. So see you then.
Awesome, and bring your favorite cocktail. And we're going to talk about state policy and federal policy and advocacy and just more ways to get engaged. Don't forget to sign in. I'm going to turn it back over to Crystal to close us out in our last minute of time together today.
There is always something good to say. So in addition to what I was saying earlier, I want to challenge everybody here to make sure you find out if your friends and family are supporting local owned raised food and farm initiatives, especially people of color. Your favorite restaurant, are they sourcing from people of color? Are they sourcing from farmers? Or are they sourcing from this mega company or this mega corporation that's trying to suck everybody up and eat everybody out? So just make sure you are challenging your peers, making sure they know information around these bills and these policies so they can speak up and they can be aware, because just because we're in this group and we're in this coalition and we're in this conversation does not mean that everybody else is not affected. We're talking about food for sustainability of our livelihood, your friends, your cousins, your nieces, your nephews, co-workers. So make sure you challenge people, and when you learn information, share that with people so they know about it and understand how important it is for them to know and be tapped into these policies. It's more effective if it's just not us, lobbying for information around farm bills. Everybody needs to know about it. Everybody needs to speak about it. Everybody needs to be pushing to make sure equal rights are fair for everyone. So it'd be great if we can be sounding boards for those communities and those groups. But once again, we've got to learn, we've got to make sure people are safe with the language, with the understanding of what's being talked about and what's being said. So that way we can help challenge those people at game nights. People come over to drink and have a great time and chill. Like, bring those conversations up about, well, they're trying to take all our damn food, or they're not supporting Black farmers, or they're not doing this and the third. Make sure we talk about these things in our groups and our communities and our families, so that way they know what's going on and the work is being done.
Thank you, Crystal. There we go. Well, thanks to everyone. This concludes our workshop. Hope to see many of you at 6:30, and hope to see y'all. I believe it'll probably be the first Friday in December, since we've got holiday week next week. So we hope to see you soon. Don't forget to sign in and enjoy the conference.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Check out
Thank you.
next 3:15 seed saving sovereignty session. Y'all check that out. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, guys.